What if the entire global economy, everything from shipping routes, national borders, megacities, and even the modern stock market, existed because of something as small, fragile, and strange as a dried plant? What if the world's first financial bubbles, its first multinational corporations, its first trade wars, and its first geopolitical conspiracies were all set into motion by a handful of spices cloves? Nutmeg, cinnamon, pepper goods, so valuable that they were once worth more than gold. This is the story of how spices didn't just flavor meals. They built the world's first global economy. And the deeper you go, the stranger it becomes. Because behind every sweet aroma and every aromatic seed, there was a network of secrecy, violence, monopolies, and economic leverage so powerful that today's oil markets, currency battles, and supply chain wars look like sequels. What started as a simple craving for flavor became the blueprint for global capitalism. And the mystery is this: how did something that grows on a tree become a force strong enough to redraw the map of human civilization? Set the stage to understand the hidden financial machinery built on spices. You need to picture a world before factories, before global banks, before container ships, before the idea of international trade even existed. For most of human history, the world was largely disconnected. Continents didn't trade on a meaningful scale. Empires operated mostly on local resources. Land routes were slow and dangerous. Sea routes were unknown or deadly. And yet, on the islands of Southeast Asia, particularly the Banda Islands, the Moluccas and Sri Lanka grew some of the most fragrant plants on Earth. Their scent traveled in the wind. The rarity gave them a mythical status. In their utility preserving meat, healing wounds, masking foul smells, performing rituals turned them into objects of obsession. By 1000 BCE, these spices were already traveling thousands of miles, passed hand to hand through merchants who each doubled their price while guarding their sources like military secrets. That secrecy created something new in human history. The first scarcity-engineered market system where information, not the product itself, was the most valuable commodity. Arab traders controlled the routes. Indian ports controlled the distribution. Chinese dynasties controlled the demand. And Europe was a hungry blind giant at the end of the chain, willing to pay anything for a taste of the unknown. This imbalance, this economic asymmetry, would trigger the rise of empires, the fall of others, and the birth of a global economy. But to see how this truly started, we have to go back to the origins. The seeds of global trade, the spice trade, didn't begin with exploration. It began with imagination. Spices were seen as magical. Cinnamon was believed to be harvested by giant mystical birds. Nutmeg was thought to cure the plague. Black pepper was called black gold, used as currency, taxes, and ransom. Demand wasn't just high, it was irrationally high. And irrational demand is the backbone of every major global market that follows. But here's the critical point. Europe had demand, but not supply. Asia had supply, but not need for European goods. So spices became a one-way wealth drain. Gold and silver flowed east. Europe grew poorer, while Asia grew richer. This imbalance became intolerable for European powers. And so the question that would change world history was asked: what if we stopped buying spices and instead took control of the source? The age of exploration. When spices became empire by the 1400s, the spice trade had been so profitable for so long that nations were willing to risk entire fleets to find a direct sea route to Asia. This wasn't curiosity. This wasn't adventure. This was economic warfare. Portugal moved first. Under Prince Henry the Navigator, they mapped the African coast, seeking a path to India. Then came Vasco da Gama, who reached Calicut in 1498, opening Europe's first direct link to spice markets. This was the moment everything changed. Because Europe no longer needed middlemen, they could buy spices at source, 4 pennies on the dollar. The profit margins were so extreme that even after funding dangerous expeditions, losses, storms, and battles, the returns were enormous. Portugal became wealthy. Spain followed. And soon, every European power wanted in. Columbus was searching for spices when he hit the Americas. Magellan's crew circled the globe chasing cloves. Explorers weren't heroes, they were price-hungry traders. And as competition increased, The spice market evolved again, this time into something darker. Not trade, monopoly. The breaking point, the monopoly that changed the world. Entered the Dutch East India Company VOC, the world's first multinational corporation. The world's first stock-issuing company. The world's first entity with the power to wage war. It was built for one purpose: control the global spice trade at any cost. And any cost was literal.
Ow.
The VOC seized islands. They destroyed trees so competitors couldn't profit. They executed growers who sold to anyone else. They built forts, bribed kings, and ran private armies. They committed genocide in the Banda Islands to secure nutmeg. These spices were the original controlled commodity. The VOC engineered scarcity the same way modern corporations manipulate supply chains, control patents, or corner markets. It was the blueprint for oil cartels, diamond monopolies, and rare mineral empires. Money flowed into Amsterdam. Stock markets flourished. The world's financial center shifted. And for a moment, the VOC had complete control. But monopolies are fragile, and markets built on secrecy and artificial scarcity eventually crack. The first global economy had reached its breaking point. When spices lost their magic, three forces shattered the spice economy. 1. Competition multiplied. England, France, and eventually other European powers fought the Dutch, broke their monopolies, and established their own trade posts. 2. Spices spread across the world. Once Europeans transplanted pepper, cloves, and nutmeg to new colonies, scarcity disappeared. Prices collapsed. Fortunes evaporated. 3. Consumer tastes changed. As spices became common, they lost their mystery and their economic power. What had once been worth its weight in gold was now sitting in every kitchen cupboard. The global economy didn't vanish, but it had to evolve. It did. The same shipping routes created for spices became highways for sugar, cotton, opium, coffee, rubber, tea. Each new industry repeated the pattern. Scarcity, monopoly, war, collapse. The world now had a template for global commerce, one born from spice fever. But the story doesn't end with collapse, because after the fall came the fix, and the fix failed in a familiar way. The illusion of control after spices lost their premium, European powers tried to maintain their wealth by inventing new systems of control. Colonies to secure raw materials, mercantilist policies to restrict trade, early central banking systems to manage capital. Chartered companies to run economies like corporations, but every solution created new problems. Monopolies collapsed. Colonies rebelled. Financial bubbles formed, just like modern housing bubbles or crypto crashes. Inflation spiraled when governments printed money to fund wars and fleets. The spice economy didn't just shape global trade, shaped global failure cycles. And that's where the parallels to today become unavoidable, the spices of today. If spices built the first global economy, what plays that role now? Look closely and you'll see the same pattern repeating. 1. Semiconductors. 90% of the world's advanced chips come from one place: Taiwan. Scarcity, concentration, geopolitical tension, just like the Banda Islands. 2. Rare earth metals. China controls over 70% of production. Global dependence mirrors medieval Europe's dependence on Arab spice routes. 3. Oil. The original black gold, literally mirroring the nickname once used for pepper. 4. Data, the new commodity traded invisibly, like ancient spice routes guarded by secrecy. 5. Bitcoin and digital assets. Finite supply, mythical aura, extreme valuation swings. Economic speculation. The same psychological drivers that made medieval Europeans risk their lives for cinnamon. But here's the shocking data point. In the 1600s, Amsterdam became the financial capital of the world because of spices. Today, 60% of global GDP depends on supply chains built on the same model the spice trade invented. Price manipulation, geopolitical pressure, strategic scarcity, speculation-driven markets, higher-risk trade routes, and economies built on commodities most people don't understand. The world didn't evolve away from the spice economy. It simply upgraded it. 3 takeaways. Asterisk. Takeaway number 1. The first global economy wasn't built on need, but desire. Asterisk asterisk humans chase rare things irrationally, and this shapes entire civilizations. Asterisk asterisk takeaway number 2. Whoever controls supply chains controls the world. Asterisk asterisk from spices to oil to microchips, power is never about the product. It's about the choke point. Asterisk asterisk takeaway number 3. Markets built on scarcity always follow the same cycle. Rise, monopolize, corrupt, collapse. Asterisk asterisk every generation thinks it's different. Every generation repeats the pattern. Final warning, the story of spices is not ancient history. It's the mirror we refuse to look into. We're living through new versions of the same old cycle, except now the stakes are higher, economies are bigger, and the dependencies are deeper. If the first global crash came from nutmeg, what will the next one come from? If you want more deep dives into the hidden origins of global economics, forgotten financial systems, and the secret forces shaping the modern world, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video. Because the next chapter of global trade is already being written. And understanding the first one might be the only way to see what's coming.